Hello there and welcome to our next database video all about normalization, the process of moving from flat file to relational databases. Now I'm going to split these down into separate videos, and the reason for that is so you can get your head around each specific stage. At A level you won't be asked to go any further than third normal form. So let's first understand what we need to do at each one of these stages. In first normal form, each record will have a primary key, and it's important to make sure that everything is dependent upon a primary key. We also need to make sure that the data is atomic, and we're going to get into that in just a second. We also need to ensure that there are no repeating groups of attributes. Once we've satisfied all those conditions, we can say that our database is in first normal form. For our database to be in second normal form, it must first be in first normal form, and also there must be no partial dependencies in our database tables. Once we've satisfied that condition, then we can say that our database is in second normal form. Then, to say our database is in third normal form, we must say that it is already in second normal form and there are no non-key or transitive dependencies involved in any of our tables. Confused much? Well, let's break it down and get into each one of them. So for these series of examples, we're going to be using the data set that you see on your screen. And I thank Isaac Computing for this example. So remember, to decide whether the data is in first normal form, you must check that the data conforms to the criteria below. Each record must have a primary key, the data in each field or column must be atomic, and each record must have no repeating groups of attributes. So we're going to go through this table and apply these rules to get it to first normal form. And the first thing I'll ask is, do we have primary keys in each record? Now, looking at each column, we do indeed have unique data, and that comes in the form of member ID. And if you look down here, each one of them, there is no repeated data. The member ID for Emily is 012010, and there's no one else like it in our attribute here. So I'm pretty satisfied that potentially that could be a primary key. And it's important to point out here that in your exam, it's normal for an ID to be a primary key. It seems to be something the exam board tends to do frequently, and it's good practice to have a unique identifier, and that's why we give it an ID tag as the name. Now, if a table doesn't have a unique column or combined or a combination of columns to make something unique, then you need to add one yourself. So you might add an attribute in there, a column in there, and make that your own ID, for example. But like I said, most tables usually have an ID field like booking ID or booking reference, for example, and they'll use that as their primary key. So I'm pretty satisfied that the records all have a primary key, and that's member ID. The next question is the data atomic. Now, what on earth does that mean? Simply, it means that data can be said to be atomic when a column contains a single value that cannot be sensibly subdivided or split down. So I'll give you an example. In the name field here, you can see there are two pieces of data in the name field. That is not good. Okay? So the name field in the example is not atomic, and that's because you can split the name into first name and surname. So on the flip side, if you look at the course description, for example, which is this one here, that is atomic when it comes to having one data item in the field, like kayaking, for example. So yeah, that is atomic there, but it's not atomic when it comes to having things like tennis and both badminton in the same record. That is not atomic. Well, in that case, John, you could say assessment date also could be split. So you could say, well, John, that here, this is not atomic because it can be subdivided further. You could divide it into day, you could divide it into month, you could divide it into year. So what you have to do is you have to use your common sense. Why would you split the date up? I know in a database we would have that attribute, that column, that would have a date data type. So I'd leave that as it is. What about something like instructor? Now the name of the instructor is also not atomic. And you can see that because there are two instructors. Let's take the first one called Sue and Sue R. So you could split this person and say, well, we need first names and surnames of the instructor, and that can be broken down further. So in total, not atomic, and not atomic in those columns. So what we need to do is we need to have a first name, we need to have a surname in there. Description, you'd have one column, but you would break them down into single records. So these all need lines going in between them to have single records here, and that means splitting up all the data, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And then instructor, we'd have instructor first name, instructor surname. Okay, apologies for the abbreviations, but I'll show you this, what it looks like in a table in just a second. So once we've sorted that out there, we need to say, does the data have repeating groups of attributes? So a repeating group of attribute is a set of attributes that appear more than once within the record structure. Sometimes a single attribute will repeat, and this must also be dealt with. So you can see here you've got multiple attributes, multiple attributes, multiple attributes again. So in this example, there's a repeating group of attributes relating to things like course codes, assessment date, emails also in breach there as well. Instructors are all in breach. Okay, now each cell must only have one piece of data in it. So we need to break all of these down into single cells or single records. So when you find repeating groups of attributes, they need to be moved into a new table and removed from the original table. However, when you move the data, you need to also link it back using foreign and primary keys. So for example, what is offending and what is creating all this duplicated data? Well, it's the individuals themselves or the members that are causing this, because Emily has had 2 assessment dates on 2 courses for 2 sports there, it looks like, and 2 fees and 2 instructors and 2 emails. So if I get rid of Emily Marr out of there, I can split these down into individual rows in my table. So what I would do is I would look at this and go, these are the people that are offending, that are causing this problem. I need to get them out and put them in their own table. So the solution for me would be create a members table. And the members table would take all the information that's pertinent to the member themselves. That would be something like the member ID, the name of the member, their phone number because it's relating to them. And that's it really. That information does not need to be in this table. I could easily just have the member ID, and then it tells me the member ID had an assessment date on this day, on this day, on this course and this course. So let me show you what that looks like when we break down the tables. And there we are. So as you can see, hopefully, I have removed the name and the phone out of the table. So now this has gone. And it's left me with a member ID, assessment date, course code, description, fee, instructor's last name and instructor's first name. Because remember, I had to break this down to make sure that it was atomic. So I've broken that down. And you'll see now that each piece of information has its own record. Now don't worry if it creates what looks like duplicated data at this point. My members table still has a link. The information has been removed. I've broken down the name of the person into the first name and their last name. The member ID is a primary key in the members table, but it is a foreign key inside the certificates table. Now the issue that I have is that because I've moved the primary key out of this table and now it's a foreign key, the certificates table has no primary key. No primary key. So I need to fix that problem, and I do that by creating a composite key. When I merge these two data sets together, they create a unique identifier. No one person has the same member ID and the same course code at any one time. So these are all still unique. 145543 and DG0011. Nobody else has that combination. And why would they? Because only one person sits a course at any one time. You can't resit courses, it looks like. They would never do the same course twice. I can confidently say that these two columns need to make up a composite key. These two tables are now in first normal form. Each record still has a primary key, which is now my composite key. The data is atomic because I've got no second data. I've got first names and surnames separated. And the data that had repeating groups of attributes, these offending members, have been removed into their own table. And now my table is in first normal form. Join me in the next video where we'll convert this into second normal form.